I, 36, female, have been divorced for 3 years. I was married to my ex-husband, Jacob, 37, for 5 years, but then I accidentally found out that he'd been cheating on me for 3 years with not just one, but multiple women. So yeah, that was the end of our marriage and we haven't kept in touch. I took the house and a lot of money during the divorce, and his entire family loathes me. But they're nothing compared to how much my ex-mother-in-law, Dina, 56, female, hates me. After our divorce was finalized, she called me and ranted about what an evil B-word I was for several minutes before telling me that she wished her son had cheated on me some more before I'd found out, and then hung up. So that's Dina for you. A couple of months ago, I started working at a new company and discovered somehow that one of my superiors is closely related to Dina, probably a first cousin or something of the sort. I'd seen pictures of her with Dina and my ex-husband on her Facebook and had feared that this would definitely affect my career, but didn't know what to do. So I said nothing and continued to work, hoping that Dina wouldn't find out about this connection. Because I knew for a fact that if Dina found out, she'd leave no stone unturned to ruin my reputation at work. Unfortunately, she did find out about it somehow and did exactly what I'd feared. I was summoned to my boss's office a few days back and was told that they had cause to fire me since one of my superiors had learned that I'd been lying about why I'd left my previous company. They believed that I'd been fired for fraud, but that wasn't true. I'd quit because the commute had been too much for me once I'd moved into a new house, and the company I work at currently also offered a better salary. I almost got fired, but I was able to contact my previous company and had them vouch for me. I narrowly avoided getting fired, and I knew for a fact that it had been Dina's relative who had tried to get me fired in the first place. After that incident, she stopped talking to me as well and would act really weird around me, even though she'd been perfectly okay with me before that. Her behavior just confirmed what I already knew was true, and I decided that I couldn't let this slide. It had been 3 years and Dina was still trying her very best to ruin my life to get back at me. I knew that Jacob was getting married again. That's what I'd heard from a couple of friends. So I decided to find out who he was getting married to so that I could warn her and hopefully get the marriage cancelled. I was fuming that Dina had tried to get me fired. I didn't care if she talked crap about me to her friends because that wasn't going to affect me in any way whatsoever. But spreading lies and rumors about me at work to try and get me fired on purpose was unacceptable, and I wasn't going to take that lying down. Besides, if some unlucky woman was getting herself into this mess, then it was my duty to make sure she knew what kind of family she was marrying into. I somehow managed to find out her phone number through a friend and called her up 2 days back to tell her everything I could. I called her at a time I was sure my husband wouldn't be home, and sure enough, he'd left for work by 9, and she was at home by herself. But she didn't seem to trust me, and it appeared that the poor woman didn't even know that Jacob had been married once before. She ended up blocking my number after a text that told me to stay away. She was in denial, clearly, and didn't want to believe that her fiancé had been lying to her. I felt awful, but that was all the more reason for me to do what I did next. I did some more digging, and a few hours later I decided to call her mother instead. To gain her trust, I told her a few things about my husband that only someone close to him would know, and she was a lot easier to convince as compared to her daughter. Besides, I could tell that she was curious to know why I was calling her. So I didn't waste much time and spill the beans on Jacob while she listened to me without a word. I kept talking for around 15 minutes and didn't spare any detail about my ex-husband's affairs, my ex-mother-in-law's vendetta against me, and how she'd recently tried to ruin my career as well. After I was done talking, I told her that I just thought that it was my responsibility to warn her, but whether or not she still wanted her daughter to go through with the wedding was up to them. I told her all I knew, and now the ball was in their court. She then thanked me in a really quiet voice and told me that she now knew what she had to do. That was really vague, and I had no idea what she'd have next. I didn't try to push further either because I did think that this was supposed to be their decision. I'd done what I was supposed to do, and I was hoping that they'd take me seriously and make sure the wedding didn't happen. Honestly, Jacob's fiancée seemed pretty desperate to believe that he was an honest man, which is probably why she didn't even try to hear me out. I mean, if I was getting married to a guy and some woman called me up claiming to be his ex-wife, then I'd definitely be suspicious and at least hear them out. So her behavior was very strange and seemed like she'd been brainwashed into believing that Jacob was some great guy or whatever. I don't blame her for that because even I'd fallen for that trap earlier. Anyway, I didn't know what to expect, but a few hours ago I received several texts from Jacob's new number accusing me of ruining his life and being a sad, lonely monster who's out for him. So I'm assuming that the wedding has been called off. AITA for telling my ex-husband's new fiancée about him and his mother? Update 1. Okay, so it's been a couple of days and I've spoken to Jacob's ex-fiancée. She unblocked me and asked to meet me yesterday, and I agreed because I was ready to answer any and all questions that she had for me. Besides, she'd made me really happy by dumping Jacob, so I owed her this. We met for lunch yesterday and I learned a lot about her. So strap in, you guys, because this is going to be a hell of a ride. We'll call her Vanessa, and she turned 25 a few weeks ago. She used to work in the same company as my ex-husband, but then quit as soon as she got engaged because, brace yourselves, she's also pregnant. Surprise, surprise. Jacob had convinced her to quit the job and stay at home for the well-being of their child, and since she was 6 weeks in already, she didn't mind because she was already feeling pretty exhausted from work, and she trusted Jacob. They'd been together for a year, and he'd been good to her, so she didn't mind quitting the job and staying at home. She wasn't showing yet, so she'd managed to keep it a secret because she didn't want anyone to think that she got engaged because of the baby, even though that actually was the case. So far, Jacob had been a good fiancé, and she didn't suspect anything, but a couple of weeks into their engagement, they'd thrown a party and some of his friends had gotten drunk and congratulated him on his second wedding. She was confused since he'd never mentioned anything of the sort. She asked him about it several times, but he managed to calm her down, saying that they were just joking to rile her up, and even though she wasn't satisfied with the answer, she put it out of her mind somehow. But then again, just last week, I called her claiming to be Jacob's ex-wife. And that totally freaked her out because that meant that Jacob had been lying to her and playing her for a while. And she'd been falling for it. She was pregnant and nobody even knew about it apart from her parents and her fiancé who had been lying to her all along. She also didn't have a job right now and was relying on Jacob to be with her, so that was another problem altogether. Initially, she tried to put this all out of her mind again and pretended that I'd never called, but then her mom called and confirmed I was telling the truth. So that was it for her, and she immediately packed up and left to go to a nearby hotel and just get away from his place somehow. She called off her wedding and broke up with Jacob through text and then blocked him since she didn't even want to hear any of his excuses. They'd been together for almost a year and he'd had several opportunities to come clean to her about his past, but he chose to lie and made her feel like an idiot. Not only that, but even after they got engaged, he didn't feel like he owed her the truth and still kept up the act. As for Dina, she'd been cold to her initially, but seemed to magically warm up to her as soon as she was told that she'd be having Jacob's baby, as if she was a grandchild dispenser and not a real human being with feelings. She'd even been willing to look past Dina's behavior and put up with her, but she couldn't just ignore Jacob's lying. Even if he had actually turned a new leaf and wasn't a serial cheater anymore, he'd still lied to her for months and had even put her in a situation where he was in control by convincing her to quit her job and live with him. He could play the good guy all he wanted, but now she knew that he wasn't so. She'd even explained her reasons in the text that she'd sent him, but he'd still called her from another number, presumably the same one that he used to text me and accused me of ruining his life with, and kept asking her why she was acting this way despite knowing exactly why. They even got into a huge fight on call, and he told her that she could leave him if that's what she wanted, but she had no right to take away his chance to become a father. So currently, she's looking for a lawyer and also a job that'll be less strenuous than the one she previously had, because she used to work 60 hours a week, and it used to tire her out even before she was pregnant. So after she found out, she knew she needed something a little less tiring. And that's why she'd wanted to meet me, because she didn't really know who to talk to about all of these problems, since she didn't have any real friends here, and the ones that she didn't know about her pregnancy at all. The poor girl almost had a meltdown while talking to me, and I could tell that the stress was getting to her. Nobody can get through something like this without a friend, and she didn't have any here, since she'd only moved here for work a few years ago. So I decided to step in and be the friend that she needed. I offered to let her stay with me because obviously a hotel would be dead expensive for her, and she'd need a lawyer as well, so she definitely couldn't afford to waste any money. I also decided to speak to a few of my friends and make sure she found a job for the time being, because I don't think she'd get maternity leave and benefits unless she'd worked for a certain number of days, and that seemed unlikely to happen so soon. But I had to make the best of the situation for her. I'd already made up my mind that if the situation worsened and she seemed to need help with her finances as well, then I'd do that for her too. I remember how scary and intimidating it had been for me during my divorce because of the sheer amount of paperwork and expenses that a divorce case involved. And Vanessa's situation was even more complicated than that. So she'd need all the support she could get, be it financial or even emotional. And I was ready to be there for her. She seemed a bit hesitant, but I reassured her that she'd be completely fine with me and she could trust me. So now she's living with me and I'm helping her to look for a lawyer and a job. I haven't heard from Jacob yet, but I'm sure that he'll totally flip out on me once he finds out what I'm doing for her. But I don't care. I'm going to do whatever I want, and I don't owe him any explanation. He's a disgusting liar, and he's never going to change. So I'm going to do all that I can to make sure he suffers the consequences of his actions. Update 2. Hey guys, Jacob somehow found out that Vanessa had been living with me, and he showed up to my place last night. It was scary, but we're safe, and that's what matters the most. I don't know how he managed to track her down, but I'm grateful that I happened to be with her when he did find her, because he was livid. I'd refused to open the door and let him in when I realized it was him, but he didn't leave and kept yelling at me to let him speak to his wife. They weren't even married yet, so I don't know why he was acting as though she actually was his wife. Vanessa didn't want to speak to him at all, so I told her to hide in the bedroom because I didn't want to stress her out. I argued with Jacob and told him that he needed to leave us alone or else I'd call the cops. He left, but he did tell me that I was making a huge mistake and that I'd pay for what I've done. Like hell I will. I wish I could move houses, but it's just not practical for me right now, so I'll just have to take some extra security measures and make sure he knows that I mean business. On the legal front, we found a lawyer for Vanessa, and she's going to file for full custody of the child in the future because she absolutely doesn't want anything to do with Jacob anymore. So co-parenting and joint custody is out of the picture. We gave up on finding her a job, though, since she's really mentally and physically exhausted. She has some health issues that are causing her a lot of inconvenience, so going back to work is probably not the best option for her right now. She doesn't have to pay for rent or other stuff since she's living with me right now, so that's all right. But she still has to cover the cost of the lawyer, and it just won't be a good look for her in court if she's filing for full custody to raise her child on her own, but doesn't even have a job. We'll just have to wing it, I guess. Her parents are sending her money for now, and that's how she plans to pay for the lawyer, some from her own savings and some money borrowed from her parents. She also has to pay for her medical expenses, and that's another bill to cover. Honestly, I'm stressing out for her, so I don't even know how she must be feeling. She's doing her best to put on a brave face and hold it together, but I can tell that underneath it all, she's really struggling. I just hope it doesn't take a toll on her health or the baby's health, since she's already in a delicate place health-wise. I've offered to cover her medical expenses, but she refused it, saying that I'm already doing way too much for her, and that really touched me. I guess I have a soft spot for her since I even have a little sister who's just a couple of years older than her, and I would definitely have gone above and beyond if she's ever landed in a situation like this. Hell, I probably would have even knocked out the guy who put her in that situation. And even here, I still would very much like to do that, but unfortunately, that'd get me arrested. Surprisingly, I haven't heard a word from Dina yet, which is strange because I can't imagine her missing a single opportunity to make my life worse. I'd thought that this would lead to complications at work, but I guess my superior has also realized that Dina was just out for revenge and had made her look like a total fool in front of the bosses just for her own selfish reasons. She's kept her distance from me since then, which is good. Update 3. Dina contacted Vanessa today and told her that I was a jealous and evil homewrecker, which is why I was trying so hard to convince her so hard to abandon Jacob. Yeah, that's right. I'm the one helping her out and making sure she's all right, while Jacob did nothing except lie to her and try to control her. But somehow, I'm the villain still. She sent all this to Vanessa through email because she was blocked everywhere else. And when she showed it to me, I was almost on the verge of calling her up to tell her that I'd drag her to court along with her no-good son if she said any crap about me ever again. It was disgusting the way she was trying to manipulate her to come back to Jacob just for the sake of her grandchild. I'm sure she wouldn't give a damn about Vanessa if she wasn't pregnant and would be treating her as badly as she treated me. But she just doesn't want to risk losing her first grandchild, which is why she's trying to undo the damage that her son had done by lying to her. Unfortunately, it's too late for that now, since we've already filed for full custody, and he'll be served with the notice in a few days. It was sad, and Vanessa was very upset about it, and the pregnancy hormones didn't help either, but we had to file the petition and get it done. It was going to be a hard time for her now onwards, but she had to get through it. She obviously misses her parents as well, and they were supposed to fly down here for her a few weeks back, but her dad fell really sick and they had to postpone their flight. They've been worried sick about what she's going through, since apparently she's been really delicate emotionally and physically since she was a kid, and as a pregnant woman, the conditions are less than ideal for her right now. They've been thanking me every single day for being there for her, which is kind of embarrassing, but it's nice that they appreciate me so much. It's good to finally feel like I made a difference. Back when I was getting divorced, I barely had any financial support or even emotional support, to be honest. Our friends were all diplomatic as hell and didn't want to pick sides, mostly because they didn't want to offend Jacob, so I ended up cutting them off. And my parents and I aren't really close, so the most that they could do was offer me consolation verbally, but nothing more than that. I felt incredibly lonely and low during that time, and the only person who'd had my back was my sister. She'd check in on me almost every day and make sure I was doing okay. So here, I'm just trying to make sure that even Vanessa has someone to count on when she's going through something so incredibly difficult. I'm not trying to be great or anything of the sort. I'm just trying to be kind, since the big reason that any of this is happening to her in the first place is me. Like, yeah, I did help get her out of a relationship with a cheater, but that started a series of problems for her, so I owe it to her. Update 4. So something pretty miraculous happened. Jacob decided not to fight for custody of his unborn child and gave up any and all parental rights. I'll get to the reason in a while, but first I just want to thank the universe for making this happen. He and his mother are freaking unhinged and have a special place in hell. I can't imagine how I'd been married to this man for so long. Anyway, It all started a few days after he was served, and of course, there was a lot of hue and cry about it from his end on social media, where he accused me of being in cahoots with his ex-fiancée to extort the child support out of him, split it between us, and then live happily since our only aim was to get revenge on him. I couldn't believe that he was talking such absolute crap about us, and people were lapping it all up. Not only that, but Dina had yet again gotten her ridiculous relative involved and had tried to cause problems for me at work by spreading the rumor that I'd slept my way to the top. Now, this was seriously detrimental to my image, and a friend of mine at work told me that it had been this superior of mine who'd been talking crap about me. I don't know what's gotten into people, but I had to put an end to it, so I decided to complain to HR and even told her about the connection with Dina. She might be my superior, but she had no right to misuse her position and try to ruin my career like this. I don't know what's going to happen to her next, and neither am I interested in finding out. I'd had enough of their bullcrap by this point, so I decided to do the same thing that they'd done and posted the entire story on social media, including how Jacob had been a serial cheater and a pathological liar, and his mother had tried to spread lies about me to ruin my career. Now that they'd had a taste of their own medicine, they realized that it wasn't very pleasant because they ended up getting a lot of hate from Vanessa's friends and even some of mine as well. They couldn't take that and ended up taking their post down and called up Vanessa from yet another number to demand that we take down ours as well. But she refused, and they got into a huge fight, which ended with Jacob doing exactly what I'd known he would do eventually. When he realized that throwing temper tantrums wouldn't get him anywhere anymore and we were beyond his control, he told her that she was on her own now and that he didn't want anything to do with her or the baby, which is good for us, since that's exactly what we wanted anyway. We just have to wrap up all the paperwork and then they'll be done. This means no child support, but she's okay with that because she's going back home to live with her parents anyway, and they'll help her out. She just doesn't want anything to do with Jacob anymore, and while I would have wanted him to pay, it's her decision after all, and I'm not going to force her to do anything she doesn't want to. I'm going to miss her. But she's promised to keep in touch and let me know once the baby's born so I can go meet them, and I'm looking forward to it. As far as Dina and Jacob are concerned, I haven't heard from them since he decided to sign his rights away, and I'm hopeful that this time it stays that way forever. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.